Property Subcommittee for meeting of the Fitchburg City Council. Today is Monday, March 11th. I now call this meeting to order. Please be advised that FATV is conducting an audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast. I ask that anyone else in the audience who is recording this meeting to please identify themselves for the record now by standing and state your name and city of residence. At this time, I ask that all electronic devices be placed into silent mode. All right, we are going to do a roll call of our present members. Councillor Boschman?
Here.
Councillor Walsh?
Here.
Councillor Van Hazenga?
Here.
Councillor Green? Councillor Green is not present. And Councillor Cragen, I am here. So I invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to please approach the podium, identify yourself by name and address, and identify the agenda item on which you would like to speak, and then you may speak on it for not more than 2 minutes. And how I'd like to do this is if we have people to speak on item number 1, we'll take that, and then we will do we'll do a public comment on item 181-23, which is 12 Park Street. After we have dealt with that matter, then we will move on to the matter of 005-24, the conservation easement agreement. So is anyone here to speak on behalf of 12 Park Street? I think Executive Director Murphy?
Yes.
Excellent.
So 12 Park Street is a former demo lot. It's just over 5,000 square feet and is eligible as an infill lot by special permit. Park Street itself is a very narrow road. It's a dense neighborhood. Technically, it's a buildable lot. The neighborhood is tight, so whether or not you want a house there, there's some question, but I did speak with a few different councillors and the ward councillor who was in favor of selling the lot as a buildable lot. So that's the ward councillor's opinion. Mm-hmm. I know, Paul, you and I have spoken, and I think you feel similar to the ward councillor. I guess I could go either way on this. When I first saw the lot, my initial thought is, wow, this is a really tight neighborhood. Do we want to see another home built? But after having talked to a number of councillors who felt differently, my recommendation would be that we could sell it as a buildable lot. Now, whether or not we wanted to do that through an RFP or sell it at an auction, I feel like because you have to get a special permit in order to build here, the risk is fairly low if we did it at auction, and we would actually likely get a better price at auction than at an RFP. Traditionally, what I've seen from RFPs is folks propose pretty low numbers for these kind of properties.
Okay, hear from Councillor Walsh.
I was just wondering if any of the abutters have expressed an interest in purchasing this.
I haven't.
To side yard.
Have not talked to the abutters.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Van Hazenga, I know you did some research on this particular piece.
Yeah, I just recognize that it is potentially buildable as an infill lot. It's about 5,800 square feet, and it is a tight neighborhood, but it's similar in size to a lot of the lots that are developed near it. Mm-hmm. So it is consistent with that particular immediate neighborhood. Right. I think if it is potentially buildable, and I will say potential because any buyer would have to go through the special permit mm-hmm. process. I think it's worth selling at either auction or RFP. I defer to economic development to see what they think would be the best method, both to as our fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers to get as much return as we can on a taken property, but also there is a need for building lots, and mm-hmm. we need housing, and if we can get a housing unit on here, I think it's the right way to go.
Okay. Councillor Boschman.
I just want to point out to the councillors that I had a piece of property in my ward on the corner of Clarendon Street and Pratt Road And it wasn't even this size, it wasn't even 5,800 square feet, it was smaller than that, and they're in a buildable lot, and we get $28,000 plus for it. So I'm all in favor of selling it outright, or I'll put an RFP. But the RFP, I don't know, it depends what you put in the RFP, but I really believe it's a good area for a house, and I agree with Andy that, and the government's always telling me we don't have enough housing for the people. So, you know, this would be right there, everything's right there, water and sewer, it's all hooked up, ready to go. So, I'm in favor of it, and well, you want to talk too, but I'd like to make a motion that we accept selling it on air. Go ahead, I take my motion back.
Oh, okay, yep. Councilman Hassinger?
I think I agree that we should declare it excess and designate it for sale. I think we do, if we don't want to do the side yard sales program, we do have to amend the order accordingly.
Correct.
And that's one question legally, do we have to designate how we're going to sell it, or just say that?
Between auction and RFP? I don't know the answer to whether or not we need to designate auction or RFP, but I think if you have I don't think it hurts if everybody is in agreement that we go to auction, that you just put that in your motion.
Okay, so I would move to amend so the first sentence to cross out the and designate it to the side yard sales program, and instead have there's excess fund property and sell it. Sorry, what was your recommendation there?
Auction.
Sell it at auction?
Only because I think the fact that they'd have to get a special permit gives us enough control to make sure that something inappropriate isn't happening there.
So, and then, so remove designated to the side yard sales program and add and sell at auction. And then also in the second paragraph, let's see. I would cross out through the side yard sales program. So the sale of the property will return the property to the tax rolls and shift maintenance responsibility to the new owner.
Okay, so we're just doing a deletion. And just a real quick sidebar, I am taking notes, and right after this meeting, I will write up minutes unless someone else feels that they would like to take the minutes as well. I can do it this time because there's 2 items, and then we'll take turns.
Right.
Okay, so what we have is a motion to amend paragraph 1 to read, "This parcel is a city tax possession acquired through foreclosure and land court. Because it is owned by the city, it is currently exempt from taxation, and the city is responsible for any maintenance. Sale of the property, deleting through the side yard sales program, will return the property to the tax rolls and shift the maintenance responsibility to the new owner." So you've made a motion. I will second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, did you have another amendment?
Just in the first sentence, removing designate to the side yard sales program and just adding sell
Thank
at
you.
auction.
Yep, and designate it to auction,
Or to be sold at auction.
to be sold at auction.
Got a question, Madam Chair?
Okay, on the question? Yep.
The question on the threat, it was brought up to my attention from one of my friends across the aisle. That's a real, like a historical area up there, the old houses. You think either way what David is, I think we ought to go either way, RFP or auction, whatever they think.
Well, let's just make our amendment.
No.
And well, Councilor Boschman, just real quick, what we have now is just an amendment on removing the side yard sales language, and then we can install the. What I learned is that you take the language out in one motion that's voted on, and then you create the new language for the final motion. So we've done that before for city property.
Okay.
So we're just taking out side yard sales, and we can certainly have further.
All right, come on.
So all in favor?
Aye.
And I believe, are we doing roll call vote with no one on Zoom? I don't think we do. All right, motion passes by unanimous consent. Now we are on what the new language will be for 12 Park Street parcels. So, please.
I think I would agree with Director Murphy that auction is probably the way to go to keep it nice and simple, and it's more appealing to a buyer just to be able to acquire the property at auction. But also, it's less work for Ms. Murphy's office to not have to manage an RFP. And
Yep.
I think they have enough on their table.
That's not why I'm recommending.
Well, you have other things to pay attention to, and
Yes.
I think we can get the same results. We'll go through the special permit process.
If I may, just what I've seen historically is that we do get more money when it goes to auction than when they go to RFP. RFP gives us a lot more control, but I feel like in this case, the special permit gives us that control.
Councilor Walsh?
That was my comment, that I think with the special permit process, you're not giving anything up by selling it at auction. Okay.
I'm okay. I'm okay with it.
Okay, my comments are that an auction can be the most exciting event in a New Englander's life. So I am in agreement. Do we hear a motion to, to declare as excess the following property and designate it to be sold at auction? And this parcel is a city tax possession acquired through foreclosure and land court. Because it is owned by the city, it is currently exempt from taxation, and the city is responsible for any maintenance. Sale of the property through auction will return the property to the tax rolls and shift the maintenance responsibility to the new owner. Do I see a motion?
So moved.
Second?
So moved, and a second. Let me get this down for the clerk's office. All right, Beth is... Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. There is an auction happening. I'm really excited about that. Now we are at 005-24, and here I will ask members of the audience to come and speak. I see we have Attorney Tree, Chair of Zoning Board of Appeals here also to speak on this matter, but I'd like to hear first from residents and ward councilor, if that makes sense. Or actually, you know what? No. We need to have Christine first, because you're going to set the table for us, and then what everyone comments will come from there. Thank you.
All right. Good evening. Barely evening, everyone. It's still 4:30 to me. Too short. So what you have before you is a proposed conservation easement agreement, and this arises as a result of a case that has been ongoing before both the Planning Board and the ZBA for some time. That is the manufactured home park at 1341 Ridge Road, which is in the rural residential district. Without going back completely through the history of this case, which extends back to 2006, there was an expansion of a prior use. There was a denial by one board and then a constructive allowance through another. The number of units continued to expand at the park. The construction continued to become a nuisance to the abutters, and this ended back up before the ZBA to review the allowability of the special permit. When that happened, engaged in hearings for about 6 months. It resulted in an appeal of the decisions that were rendered by the zoning board, and through some conciliatory work, all of the parties ended up back before us. And I think through some diligent work with their counsel, we came to an agreement before the ZBA regarding the number of units that would be constructed from the current point to the end, a timeline of completion of that construction, ensuring that certain amenities that were to be installed for the residents were in fact installed in a timely fashion, and that the project became complete. One of these aspects was the mechanism for ensuring that there would be no further units constructed after the ones that had been allowed, and that was a +7 from the 41 units that had been constructed to date, plus the recreational center for the residents. The owner has worked diligently to complete the conditions that we set upon them, which if there's any interest in that, I'll be happy to go through. But the thing that is before you is a conservation easement which is intended to lie on all of the unconstructed property that remains in ownership. This was a feature of the agreement that was worked out between one objecting abutter and the owner, and was incorporated into our decision. In the beginning, the proposition was that the abutter might hold the easement. There was some concern that would not be appropriate regarding the longevity and the kind of easement it was. So we did insert language allowing a nonprofit to hold the easement. There was some further controversy where it was suggested at one point that the homeowners association for the manufactured home park would hold the easement. They are a nonprofit, but their goals are not compatible with this easement. After that issue was resolved, the parties and the owner went back to the Parks Commission to see if the Parks Commission, as the city, would be interested in holding agreement, and it's my understanding that that was given a favorable vote. The form that is before you is in great essence that originally appeared before the ZBA, and the ZBA requires generally that it not change substantially. It is my understanding that there are some differing opinions about paragraph 5. Paragraph 5 is on whether or not this easement may ever be modified. As drafted, it states that it may be modified by both of the parties in agreement. From the ZBA's perspective, again, this was intended to be one of two mechanisms preventing further development of the property. It's in rural residential. It's closely built together. There was a great modification of the natural conditions of the lot in order to construct it, and further construction is not compatible with the goals of rural residential zoning or the present goals of the city. I don't have a great amount of discomfort in it remaining in this fashion, as long as the city is one of the two parties that holds the right to say yes or no. And that is because we are a representative government, and if our representative government no longer feels that it is necessary to hold this easement and prevent construction, that, in my mind is just the way that government works. We represent the will of the people. Nor do I have a terrible objection if it were to be made unmodifiable, although I can certainly conceive of some conditions that would arise in the future where you would want to be able to modify it. And a compromise between those two positions might be to make it unmodifiable for a term certain between 10 and 20 years. And then after that, again, modifiable by both parties. Happy to answer questions, but that is a summary of what you've received before you. I'm sure other people would have comment on it. Okay? Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. I think we'll move on now to the public comment part of this. I'm sure we will bring Attorney Tree back to the podium, but do we have anyone here to speak on the public comment side of things? Councilor Fleming?
Thank you. I don't have a problem with the easement. I've actually been part of this construction for now 7 years when it was first brought to my attention. I guess my biggest concern is some of the conditions in here about being able to construct, install, or maintain permitted structures. If we're trying to keep this from being built on, I don't understand why this condition is in there. But I have no problem with the city taking over this property and maintaining it. I'd just like to see this area stay the way it's supposed to be, rural residential. Thank you.
Okay. I also got an email from a Kathy Deschamps, and she wrote to us, next time we have city property, we will absolutely have a Zoom option. And she had a communication about the, her concern was the language on preservation of easement area. So she pretty much echoes what Ward 5 Councilor Fleming has brought forward. I think that is the substance. On this expectation, there should not be a reason to put any structure on the land. So that was her comment. I believe we've got some other folks present who'd like to speak. So please state your name and address, if you would, once you're in front of us.
Hi, I'm Mary Ellen Mara Christian. I'm at 71 Bennett Road. I don't want to go, I guess I can echo what Councillor Fleming had said. And I also just want to make one quick note under, this is called a conservation easement agreement. And on the very first line, it says this landscaping agreement. At one point, I know the title was a landscaping agreement, so I just would, if you could please consider changing that this is a conservation easement. And to talk about what Kathy had mentioned and what Marissa Fleming had mentioned is that I would, if you could please consider these next changes on page 2, and it's because there's no structures that exist in the easement area, so therefore I feel mention of such is not needed. So like on page 2, letter C, the very last line, it says CRNT expressly reserving the right to construct, install, and maintain the permanent structures in the easement area. I think that maybe if you could consider just deleting that line, which would help also what Councillor Fleming is saying and what Kathy Deschamps is saying. Same with that number 3, preservation of easement area. There's a line in there that says construct, install, or maintain the permanent structures, which do not exist in that area, so maybe deleting that. So it just says except as necessary to or prevent damage, and continue there. And number 4, under no impairment of the easement area, same thing to be consistent, except for the permanent structures which do not exist in the easement area, just to delete except for the permanent structures, delete that. Again, this is to be consistent, no structures exist in the easement area, and per the zoning board's decision of November 16th, 23, a conservation easement shall at a minimum prohibit development of that area. And that's why I don't particularly care for paragraph 5, but Attorney Tree just spoke of that, so I will let you folks to discuss that. And one more thought, please, and if you could consider, just because the city recognized the impact this property has caused its neighboring residents, that it may be helpful to future boards and commissions to include an intent and a purpose in this agreement, so that future board members can understand. They may not go back to the tons and tons of minutes and the decisions that were put on, so that they may wonder why this easement was put into place and why the Parks Department is holding it. And I think those two things can easily be put in on page 1. Like, for instance, an intent could be included on page 1 in recitals under B, where it says, whereas city has requested that CRNT grant city a perpetual and royalty-free easement to, and you could include something like, prevent any further construction of buildings or structures, temporary or permanent, and to continue what it says today, to preserve the wooded area shown as the easement area, and so forth. And then one more, the purpose could be included under the agreement area on number 1, under the easement for access and maintenance. If you look the third line down, it says around the easement area shown on Exhibit A, attached here to, and you could include for the purpose of, and I'm just giving an idea, but how I understand what the intent of this easement was for is the purpose to create open space, protect wildlife habitat, and the regeneration of natural growth. And maybe include, because it's going to be held under the Parks Department, to also to preserve and protect the the Fitchburg City Forest, which actually abuts the park on the south side. And that is, I think, the reasons why it's falling under the Parks Department to hold. And my last thought is I hope the city is consistent with setting the precedent that all city-held conservation restrictions and easements are held in perpetuity. So thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Mrs. Mara. Christian. Would anyone else like to speak on this matter? Yep. Okay. Ms. Hamburg? Please state your name and address.
Hi, Joanne Hamburg, Real Estate Exchange, 54 Chase Road, Lunenburg, Mass. I just want to mention to Ms. Christensen that the structure she's talking about is a drainage structure. There's no physical buildings in the area, but we have a drainage structure, and that's why we need to maintain the area. And that's why it's in there. This agreement has been reviewed by Attorney Pucciatari, Attorney Tree, and Attorney Lou Levine, and all three have approved the agreements. So I think that we're good to go. But if there's anything you want me to comment on, I'd be more than happy to.
Okay. Thank you. Would you like to speak as well? Alrighty.
Arthur McGurn, Joanne's husband, 238 Fire Road 16, Lunenburg. I also just want to follow up on the definition of structure. Structure is not a dwelling. Structure is not a house. A structure, if you look in the dictionary on how it's defined, it's an assembly of parts, okay? That defines a structure. So that's what they wrote in there, is the structure that Joanne speaks to, is there is a structure there, and it has to be maintained there because it's the drainage for their property. So if that's taken away, then their whole problem, what they originally came to, was that the water was backing up onto their property. So that's what our engineer provided, and the structure in definition is that. Okay, so if we understand the word structure and have it defined, you'll notice that it is not a building. It's a series of things. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that. Alrighty. And members of the subcommittee, I see Councillor Van Hazinga has his hand raised.
Yeah, just the explanation of the permitted structures, it makes sense. It does highlight that it's not going to be another residential structure or parking or anything like that. It was mentioned the initial introduction. It does reference landscaping easement agreement. Is that intentional or was that a typo?
It's the same thing.
They both mean the same thing. Unfortunately, it was started.
That was corrected on a prior version to conservation easement. The error has made its way into the current petition.
Thank you. That does happen sometimes when there's multiple versions.
Okay. May I ask if that is going to be correctly amended by the Ms. Hamburg's attorney? So, no? Or who is going to make that correction?
It says, I'm sorry, but I believe it says conservation agreement on the top.
It does, but it doesn't say, then it says landscaping. It's an inconsistency. It was corrected before, and it just made its way here. As always, if you're dealing with a legal document that is the conveyance of a property interest, one way or the other, you should consult with the city solicitor.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, so this is something that I'll put a post-it and a request that the city solicitor make that amendment from landscaping easement to conservation and change those words. Okay. Councillor Walsh, Councillor Boschman, thoughts, comments?
I have no comment.
No comments?
I just have a question for Attorney Tree, if you don't mind. Is it your understanding that when I'm reading this, it talks about permitted structures, so whatever is, that itself limits what can be built or changed or modified in any way, correct?
Permitted structures is a term that is defined within the agreement. It is used as a capitalized term, which means it's a defined term limited to what is in the agreement. And in the agreement, it is drainage, utility, and other structures as from time to time are necessary and incidental to the development and maintenance of the CRNT property, approved by the decision of the ZBA. So it refers back to the ZBA decision, which itself limits development of the property. So structures in our zoning ordinance has a meaning that would encompass a building, a utility pipe, a road. It is broad. It is a man-made structure. And I believe, I'm going to ask to confirm, all of the utility structures are currently there. Are the road structures currently there? Any? Yeah, in the easement area. No road structure. Okay. So if there were a reference to existing structures, so that would be, we would say, except such existing drainage, utility, and other structures as from time to time are necessary and incidental, and then changed it to the maintenance instead of development and maintenance. I think that would encompass what is needed to be done. But again, change language, talk to city solicitor's office to make sure that they have no objection. It's, you know, if you wanted to make that change, and just to be very definitive about the fact that this would not encompass new dwelling units. New parking areas would be the other thing. New recreational units, new storage sheds, new maintenance areas. Those are the kind of things, if you wanted to be very explicit about it, you would add some language about that. Before I sit down, I'm going to see if anybody else has another question.
Okay.
I got a question.
Okay, Councilor Boishman.
So you're telling this board, too, and the people on TV, that this project's going to be done by the end of the year?
So we have, I thought we might have this question. So this is what was required to be finished by December 31st of this past year, and the owner did in fact complete. Removal of any excess material so that there's no more trucking of large trucks full of material down the road. No more rock hammering. And blasting was prohibited with the ZBA decision. No processing of excess material. So that was a rock, I call it a rock grinder. I'm sure there's a different term. Made a lot of noise. Rough grading of the road and installation of the utilities and drainage, according to the plan. So that's why those structures are existing, because they were completed by December 31st. Paving of the driveways on the existing homes, regrading of all the home sites so that we had an adequate amount of area that was landscaped, so that you didn't have, you know, a very thin veneer of loam on top of the construction material. All erosion controls in place, the outside perimeter of the product to be regraded, loamed, restored, and seeded. An operation maintenance plan for the stormwater drain system was filed, reviewed, and I believe there were some comments made where there was modification again. That was completed, which is great because it is, we're so close to being done, you know? From here out.
Excuse me, can we stop for a minute?
Yes.
Who's going to maintain the drainage? Are you guys going to maintain it?
Owner.
It's part of the agreement, so you'd be doing that every year, checking it out? Oh, every other year?
There's a whole operation and maintenance program.
Is that?
There's a whole operation and maintenance program that's been submitted.
All right, okay.
And that's been reviewed by DPW.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, thanks.
The things that are next to be done, the remaining home pads and connections for the utilities and the road shall be paved by July 1. Wonderful. We are holding the certificates of occupancy on 2 of the additional units pending completion. And then the other thing that should be done by July 1 is the recreation unit for the residents of the facility. All of the home units will be installed and the project completed by November 20th, 2024. And then we have some continuing conditions. Nope. No, it was not. So
It's
it's
July 1st for the pads, is that what it was?
July 1st for the pads, November 20th for completion of the project.
Yeah, no problem. We'll get
Yep.
it done.
So, and then the special permit to be recorded with the Registry of Deeds, which has been done. The thing that is pending before our board is this agreement, and there is currently a deadline of our April meeting for it to have been signed and recorded by the owner. And if it's not acceptable to the city, we're going to need to seek another resolution. So, or really the owner is. Any other questions?
Comments or questions from anyone? Yep.
I think it's good that we're coming to a resolution of this project and this issue, so I think I appreciate all the work that's been done to get here, and I think this is part of the steps to make it happen, so I think this makes sense, and I'll be happy when everything is done and all the residents are there and all the landscaping's finished, and move on.
Great. All right.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Attorney Tree for working with our schedule. I know this is above and beyond what you would be doing on ZBA. But I would like to ask, is it our responsibility to put the note into the city solicitor that landscaping easement changes to conservation agreement? So that is something that we need to do because
Yes.
we are making that decision at this meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
The ZBA has no authority to accept or deny a piece of property.
Okay. But after the final gavel, if we could just take a moment, I want to make sure that I'm clear on everything that I need to get back to the clerk's office. So I don't think I have anything substantive beyond that. So, Councillor Walsh.
Would it make sense, and I don't want to delay this in any way, but if we could, what I would feel more comfortable doing is running this by the city solicitor to make those necessary changes in this agreement. And I think we could get an answer fairly quickly, and then we could.
So, but we'd have to reconvene.
Yep.
Yep. So here,
I'll make a suggestion to you.
Please.
Going back on my former statement to you. You may make a motion to approve, if you wish to approve, in form substantially as listed, and that gives some wiggle room to the final declaration.
Okay, approve. I like the sound of that. Approve in, one more time, please.
In form substantially as presented to the committee.
Yeah, because again, it's literally landscaping swaps, conservation swaps in for landscaping. And we've got our definition of structure that was
The
presented.
permitted structure, so, yeah.
Right. And I would also like to, I'm going to weigh in at this point unless anyone else. So I, as what I do as the chair of city property, and I know everyone here does the same in their own time, but I went round with James Bunnell, the director of Parks and Rec. So to show him how the kingdom of Parks and Rec will be expanded by these 8 acres. And we went up and parked and had a look at it, and what we saw was construction, and then we saw forest. And he was very clear on where it would be, connected, because we had our map, and I'm as clear as I can be on how it'll be connected as well. So it seems very straightforward. He was very clear to me that forest is forest. It is not developable. It is not on the way to becoming something else. It is literally forest. And there's many grades of forest. I mean, this is a pine forest, so I imagine there's going to be lots of lady slippers that come up in the spring because they love pine duff. So it's, it's interesting it's classic forest. And again, this is built on the Fitchburg Pluton, which undergirds the entire city and causes, great joy when we had the Rollstone Quarry, but great heartache for anyone trying to build anything, including my family when we built. So I think if we put a motion forward, which is, may I ask someone to make a motion that we approve in form substantially as presented to committee in the affirmative?
So moved.
Second?
So moved in a second. Anyone want to speak further on the motion? All right, I think we have all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes.
And the only change is going to be that conservation to landscape, which I have no problem with, that one word change, so.
Sure. Okay, I don't,
One more question. How soon do you think, because I have to have it recorded by April 3rd?
I will be getting this back to the, I think I can hand this off to Executive Director Murphy, if you wouldn't mind sticking this in the clerk's office, just this package. Are you going back inside? Is anyone going back inside?
I can go back inside, but doesn't this need to go back to full council?
No, it needs to go back to the clerk's office first.
Full council.
Oh, full council first? Okay, then we will be reviewing this a week from Tuesday, which will be the 19th?
The 19th.
Right, so it'll be March 19th that this...
We come back here?
Yeah, come back on the 19th for city council. This will be on the agenda, but again, we have approved, we have acknowledged that we have read and reviewed. We thank everyone for coming here today, and unless anyone has further announcements or concerns, we will be adjourned. Our next meeting is TBD. Meeting is adjourned.